So I had this one floppy. It was like a Looney Tunes game on one side, and on the other, it was a text-based adventure that was not for kids.
Okay.
We'll put it that way. I'm like 10 years old reading this like very erotic text-based adventure, and I think I showed my dad, and he's like, "Yep, that's a game." He didn't care. It's just words on a screen, right? He didn't really care, but like,
Yeah.
I'm still looking for that game too. I can't find any evidence that it existed online, and I have a memory of what I believed the name was at the time. But like I've never been able to find it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tark Talks, YouTube's most unreliable gaming and niche news program. First off, let me just apologize quickly for this video being at least a little bit later than I intended. Thing is, I had a video I was working on, like a single news topic, and I was actually near completion. It was roughly 10 minutes, something I had to spin off into its own video. However, as I was putting the finishing touches on it, sourcing graphics and quotes for the story, I began to get a little bit less confident in the story and how I presented it. And rather than risk putting it out there and causing outrage that people might point in the wrong directions, I decided for now I'd be scrapping it entirely. The topic will likely come back in a future video, but I'd like to make sure I can at least do a better job of it than I was about to. It sucks, but it happens. That aside, there's a few interesting things left for today's show. Sony recently held a PlayStation showcase, which I guess is different from a State of Play, somehow. We had the release of Tales of Arise in the 4th and final Ava movie, and there was some curious news regarding Final Fantasy IX, of all things. But let's start with the PlayStation showcase.
I'm Jim Ryan,
President and CEO of Suckin' Nuts. Like always with events like this, I don't go in expecting everything or even many things to appeal to me. So if I see things that generally should make people happy, then I'll call the event a success. And this event, I'd certainly say, was a success. We opened the show with an announcement of a Knights of the Old Republic remake. The trailer didn't reveal much, and I've got no current interest in picking it up myself, but I'll be paying attention to reviews when it drops and any sales it may get following that. There was, however, some controversy over some of the staff working on it due to past tweets they've made, but honestly, I don't give a shit what they might have said in the past, and I'm not in the game of judging their work years before its release. Either the way they act on social media will come through in the game, or it won't, and we won't know until it's finished. So if you're waiting for me to freak out about this at all, don't. I'm not gonna be. Next, we got a trailer for the Korean-made Project Eve, which has nothing to do with Parasite Eve, but looks pretty badass regardless. A lot of crazy DMC-looking hack and slash stuff and whatever this is. The graphics so far look really nice too, and I like the main character's kinda trashy design, even if I fully suspect her, physics will be nerfed prior to launch. Thanks, Sony. Of course, there was some controversy surrounding this too from a select few pockets of people, you know, complaining about the sexualization of the main character, but like, counterpoint, shut up. I mean, with all due respect, y'all can feel however you want, but the whole only Bayonetta gets a pass thing got old a long time ago. Not every game is made with every audience in mind, so if you don't think this appeals to you, or you can't look past the parts that don't, then leave it be and let the audience who will enjoy it just have it in peace. There's enough games out there for every demographic, so we really don't need to bend individual games to suit specific audiences. Later, we got a trailer for Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, a new Borderlands experience. And though I do like the franchise, I'm not interested enough to give this a look anytime soon. After that, we got a trailer for Forspoken, formerly known as Project Athia. The graphics sure are shiny, I'm calling it now though. This might be the Watch Dogs of the PS5 generation. As in, I suspect things to look a little bit worse when it finally drops, but of course, we will see. I like all of the cultural imagery and the fantasy elements look pretty sick. The gameplay looks like it's gonna be really fun too, but I have some reservations about the main character's personality, or at least the dialogue so far.
I just moved it with my freaking mind! Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, kill jacked up beasts, I'll probably fly next.
And I'm not too fond of the isekai perspective either. But alas, it's all about what they do with it in the end. As long as they don't go full on Juno or Life is Strange with the dialogue, I can probably manage.
Now you're totally stuck in the retro zone. Sad face.
Either way, this is one that I still think is worth keeping an eye on. A short while later, we got our first video of the just earlier announced Alan Wake remaster, and I'm fully on board for this one. This is one of my favorite games of that generation. I played through it probably 5 or 6 times, and I just finished reading the novelization a short while back. It could have been better. And while the gameplay loop in the original did get pretty old pretty quick, this is one I sink into time and time again for the atmosphere and the abstract Lynchian story. I absolutely love this game. Hopefully they manage as well to keep all of the licensed music in the game, as this game introduced me to some songs and artists that I'd come to love deeply as a result. But then Remedy always knocks the music choices out of the park. Next, we got a trailer for Rockstar's Spoiled Milk, then we got a big gameplay trailer for Ghostwire Tokyo. This is a game I was optimistically keeping my eye on, though this trailer has kind of dampened my spirits a bit. The gameplay looks a little bit like Shadow Warrior crossed with BioShock and Mirror's Edge, and I have nothing against any of those games. I actually really love the Shadow Warrior games. It's just not the kind of gameplay I was hoping for, and it kind of changed the whole tone I was perceiving the game to have. It's probably still going to be pretty dope regardless, but for now, it's no longer really high on my interest list. But what do you guys think? Did this help or hurt your interest? The next thing of note for me was probably the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, a remastered collection of Uncharted 4 and the spin-off Lost Legacy. I'll be honest, this seems pretty pointless. I haven't played Lost Legacy yet, but 4 still holds up just fine. In fact, of the original quadrilogy, if that's how you say it, it is my favorite one. I feel a port would suffice just fine for these games. Just after this, Insomniac announced Spider-Man 2 and a Wolverine game. I kind of got superheroed out about 14 or so years ago, so I'm not really going to be paying much attention to these, though given Insomniac's recent track record, I do expect them to at least be quality titles. And hey, I doubt a new Wolverine game could be worse than the PS3 one, so it's at least got that going for it. Then the show closed with a God of War Ragnarok trailer, which is something I'm really looking forward to. I know some OG God of War fans are still up in arms over the new ones, but I absolutely loved the 2018 game and really look forward to this one. And would you believe it, there was some controversy over this trailer too. Not that it's worth giving any spotlight to. But alas, the internet is, after all, a public swimming pool. There will always be those few people who think it's okay to piss in the water. Anyway, that's my takeaway. Overall, I think it was a pretty solid event with a lot of negativity in the aftermath. But I'm not gonna let that deter me. At least not yet. How did you guys feel about it? Either about the show itself or the drama that followed it? I know there's gonna be a few of you who are really skeptical about the KOTOR remake, so what do you think? Is this a wait and see sort of thing, or is the game a write-off already? Basically what I'm saying is my swimming pool is open to you. So if you need a piss, by all means, whip out that giant f***ing cup and let it. Right, as my pool slowly fills to the brim and starts to yellow, let's take a look at the next couple stories. Tales of Arise finally released, as did the 4th and final installment in the Ava Rebuild series. Let's start with Tales. So for the first time since the PlayStation 3 to the early PS4 generation, Bandai has released a new mainline Tales of game, and man does it feel well overdue. Many of you probably don't realize this because it's rare I get the chance to talk about them, but the Tales of franchise is my favorite franchise. And yes, that means ever. But Tarks, you all scream. I always thought Kiseki was your favorite. Nope, Kiseki's trash. It's all about Tales, baby. Now, unfortunately, I am not one of the people who are lucky enough to start playing prior to launch, so I picked up the game on day one like many of you and have been casually making my way through it, just soaking it all in. Though I can't say anything too definitive yet, I can say this. I am having an absolute blast, and so far it feels every bit worth the wait. But the reason I wanted to talk about it today was to give Bandai some much due credit. First, the release of Tales of Arise on Steam seen the series' highest concurrent player count to date. This probably isn't all that big of a feat considering the release schedule for the series on PC in the past, but it's a feat nonetheless and indicates great things for the future of the franchise. It was also in the highest selling Steam games for days prior to its launch, so kudos are definitely in order. But what's really worthy of the most celebration here is how Bandai handled the delay they faced in shipping the collector's editions. When it became apparent that Bandai would not have the collector's editions in a lot of players' hands on day one, they made a move I don't think many people truly appreciate the scope of. As players reached out to Bandai about the delay, Bandai responded by sourcing download codes for the game for these players. Granted, there was a slight delay in the codes activating, as that's just how the process works, but it allowed any player with a delayed shipment to at the very least start the same morning as everyone else. The thing about this that I think many people overlook though, is that these game codes are not free. Game codes, much like review codes, are things that actually have to be purchased by the company to be sent out and distributed. I don't know all of the ins and outs of the process, and it's possible they likely get a discount of sorts purchasing their own product codes, but this is basically basically equivalent to every collector's edition getting 2 copies of the game. Since COVID started, we've seen a number of instances involving various companies struggling to get their special editions shipped out, and none of them have gone the extra mile like Bandai did here. So thank you Bandai for stepping up, putting your own funds on the line, and fulfilling your promise to the player in ways few other companies would ever do. It is recognized and deeply appreciated. You set a wonderful example here, and hopefully other companies, the ones who have enough capital, can notice your actions and do something similar when they're hit by a similar situation. Now, let's talk Ava. And P.S. Ava shirts and a bunch of other really cool designs are available for sale in the link in the description at icetaesthetics.com. Iced Aesthetics has been a great partner for this channel for the last little bit, and if you want to support them like they're supporting me and help the channel out as well, then take a swing by their website and use my promo codes that are in the description below. Now on with the story. So, to preface, I have a weird history with the Ava movies. Actually, I have a weird history with Ava in general. Back when I was a teen and before I had the internet at home, I used to blind buy anime from a local record shop. One day when I was in there, I seen this dual pack of EOE and Death and Rebirth. Now, I didn't look at it for very long, I just had the money and I thought it looked cool, so I picked it up. I actually assumed at the time of purchase that this was a duology of movies. I figured out pretty quick, however, that wasn't the case. But I probably watched this dual pack a good dozen or more times before I seen the rest of the series. Suffice to say, I actually got very attached to the series despite my odd introduction to it. It has come to be my favorite anime in the years since.
Oh man, I butchered this. Oh, those tack holes. It'll never be the same.
So when the first movie launched, while I had the feeling I absolutely didn't need it in my life because the original series was fine, I still went into it with cautious optimism. After finishing it, however, I decided it was too different and too the same, and it just wasn't going to be for me, so at that point, I just wasn't going to watch the rest of them. After the second movie dropped and I seen screenshots with new characters and such, I decided that yeah, I really didn't need it. And I never looked at them again. Until now. Recently, the fourth movie dropped and made a new canonical end for the franchise. And as the world tuned in, the people on my Twitter feed were raving non-stop about how great it was, while I sat at home reading these tweets like,
Why did you come?
so of course, I caved. I had to know. I finally went back and gave the movies a proper watch. Upon my rewatch of the first, I actually came to like it a great deal. It was a lot less off-putting than I remembered it being. Yeah, it still felt somewhat redundant and I still liked the pacing of the show more, but this movie was a really good attempt at condensing things for a more streamlined experience. The second movie introduced some new things, but I was pretty open to it. They don't get in the way too much and they do work towards a pretty satisfying and intriguing conclusion. The third movie was a bit odd. It felt like old events in entirely new packaging, and I'm not gonna lie, it almost felt like it soured what the previous film was building towards. I don't think I really enjoyed how they handled the story in this one. I had a hard time looking past comparing how things were going versus how they used to be, and just trying to make sense of how all the story events were now collapsing into overlapping moments that didn't quite exist before. At this point, I definitely preferred the original build. It's not like it was bad though, but it was easily the weakest of the bunch for me. The fourth one? Let me start by saying it was really good, but I don't think my enjoyment quite lived up to how I seen others reacting. And when all was said and done, I still vastly prefer the original run and ending the series at EOE. That said, this was a spectacular ride that gave some interesting insight into characters we didn't get before, and gave closure to some of the cast in a way that it feels fine closing the book on them and never opening it again. In saying that though, there was something so ideal about how it ended, especially in the closing scene, that it came off as somewhat trite or rather cliche. Too perfect, even. And while yeah, it was a rather feel-good ending, I can't for the life of me tell if it was meant to be ironic, as so much of the original run was, or if this was the ending more vocal critics of the original ending had been wanting to see all this time. But therein lies one of the more confusing things about the entire movie series for me. It's hard to tell what is and isn't ironic anymore, or what's genuinely pandering with no ulterior motive. The original franchise worked as a bit of a deconstruction of anime, mecha, and by and large, anime fans. Yet this movie series, at times, seems to lean into these things rather than create critiques of them. I couldn't quite get it out of my head that maybe I was supposed to be seeing something deeper than the depths of the skin-tight suits that are crawling up the girls' ass cracks. But I couldn't shake the feeling that anything that I was coming up with was a stretch, an answer formulated because I wanted to find one. Overall, it is a way better movie series than I was originally giving it credit for, and I'm happy to have finally seen it. But there's no way that it will ever overtake what the original anime means to me, nor do I think it was executed better or a more meaningful experience. But it's a series I'm gonna have to watch at least a couple more times before I fully settle an opinion on it. Sticking kind of on anime as a topic, let's talk about Final Fantasy IX now. I'm sure that from that sentence alone, you already know what the story is. And yes, this is very old news, but it's important for the next part. Way back in late June, it was revealed that Final Fantasy IX would be getting an anime adaptation aimed at kids, which is fine. With little exception, this should work pretty well for children, and maybe even a crossover audience with adults, so long as they don't remove the teeth from a few certain sequences. Now, JRPGs getting anime adaptations isn't new. It's been happening with the Tales franchise for decades. We recently had an announcement for a Trails of Cold Steel anime and Blue Reflection. The difference here is that, by and large, those anime always happen when the series is still somewhat relevant, and they usually exist to help sell a product. While I don't think Square is really looking to boost sales of the OG Final Fantasy IX or its HD port, so this announcement was a little curious. Would it still be profitable to do the anime without a new tie-in game? Sure, but knowing Square, there's probably something else to capitalize on. Which takes us to the next part of the story, the Nvidia leak. In mid-September, there was a database breach at Nvidia, and in this breach, a massive list of unannounced games was dredged up. And while it seemed promising on the surface, I'll be the first to say that a lot of it seems a little too good to be true. But Nvidia also confirmed the list's authenticity, more or less saying that it's speculative and nothing in here is meant to be taken as confirmed. I mean, that makes sense, really, looking at the list, but also like, sure thing, Nvidia, whatever you say. Whatever you say. In this list, however, we've seen a number of games from Square Enix, including the curiously chosen for a speculative list, remasters of Chrono Cross and Final Fantasy Tactics. Something I'd love to see both of, and choices that make me think this list isn't entirely speculation, because why Chrono Cross of all things? I'm not shitting on it, but I feel Square still has more sought after classics than this that they're likely to make ports of first. Anyway, that's not really what's important here. Also in this list was something called Final Fantasy IX Remake. The only reason I give this list any potential shot at credibility is because of its timing with the announcement of the Final Fantasy IX anime. Quite frankly, it just makes too much sense. Now, I'm not gonna go out there and say I actually trust this list. To be honest, I don't. Until I see something with my own eyes, you know, confirmed, basically written in stone, it's not real to me. Yet, I do believe there's at least potential for an FF9 remake, even if this leak is currently entirely false. Final Fantasy IX is a really special game to me, so if it is getting remade, I will welcome it with open arms. However, my approach to it will be a lot like my approach to the first Ava movie. Whether it's too different or too much the same, I may struggle to find a place for myself in its audience. But it's not like the original is going to be getting taken away from me or anything. So here's to hoping a new generation discovers this incredible classic in one form or another. And here's to hoping it's not butchered. Otherwise, there's not exactly a whole lot to look into here. We have a confirmed Final Fantasy IX anime and a rather curiously timed speculative rumor of a Final Fantasy IX remake. Only time will tell if that second one actually has any truth to it. But your guess is as good as mine, so what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. And that's where we're gonna wrap it up today. Some of you are probably wondering about another story that happened recently and my thoughts on it. We're talking about a certain fan translation of a certain Kiseki game that is already announced for localization, a fan translation that NIS America hit with a cease and desist, and while it was gonna be a story, there's not really much here to talk about, so I guess I'll just give you my quick thoughts here. I feel like it was really obvious that cease and desist was coming. Like, anybody should have seen that coming, and I don't exactly blame NIS America for doing that. A fan translation of a game that they have already announced is getting localized would really only serve to undercut the sales later on, and they do have to protect their sales and their investment. Not that I blame anybody for wanting it, or blame anybody for trying, but like, the second you make that project public, yeah, it's gonna disappear. It sucks, but it is what it is. Anyway, we're all Kiseki fans. We should be used to waiting at this point. But yeah, that's where we're leaving things today. If you guys liked this video or found it useful at all, entertaining, whatever, blah, 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 you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you can. Links to all my socials and my Patreon support page are in the description below. And as always, folks, fuck off. Peace. Bang. Boom, boom. That's a wrap. And that's some crap. Hat hair. See ya.